1880s. You arrive in an old west town after days on the road. In your pocket, a single crumpled dollar bill. Sounds like poverty, right? Wrong. Back then, $1 had the buying power of about $30 today. It was enough to pay for a night at a hotel, dinner with whiskey included, and still have some change left over. Now, let's find out 20 things you could buy back then.
Number 1. Whiskey. What cowboys drank in saloons had nothing to do with the whiskey you buy at the store today. Most saloon owners made their own liquor in the back of the place. The recipe was simple and brutal. Pure alcohol mixed with tobacco juice, cayenne pepper, and sometimes even kerosene to give it that yellowish color. People called it rot gut, and it wasn't just a nickname, because the drink literally burned up the stomachs of the people who drank it. A shot cost between 5 and 10 cents. That meant that with just $1 in his pocket, a cowboy could drink 10 to 20 shots in a single night. Many died not from gunshots, but because their liver simply stopped working after years of drinking that stuff. And the craziest part, nobody complained about the taste because there was basically no other option.
Number 2. Beer. 5 cents a glass. $1 bought 20 beers. Sounds cheap, but there was one detail nobody talks about. It was all warm. Refrigeration simply didn't exist in the Old West. Ice was a luxury that only arrived in blocks carried by train, and most saloons never saw any. In more isolated towns, owners mixed the beer with river water to make the keg last longer. And the taste? Bitter, cloudy, often sour. Nobody complained because the alternative was simply not drinking anything at all. In some places, beer was safer than the available water itself, which could be contaminated. Men drank standing up at the bar with no stools and no fuss. It wasn't fun. It was part of surviving after a full day in the sun. Number 3. Gambling. Did you know faro was so popular in the Old West that pretty much every saloon had at least one table running 24 hours a day? It was played even more than poker, and here's the detail not many people mention. The people running the tables rigged the deck so often that a saying came out of it back then. The only honest game in town is the one that hasn't started yet. Doc Holliday, who had a dentistry degree from Philadelphia, gave up the profession because he found out he could make a lot more money sitting at a gambling table than treating patients. In Dodge City and Tombstone, you could get into a round for just 10 cents. $1 was enough to spend the whole night playing. A lot of cowboys blew months of wages in a single night and walked out of the saloon without a penny in their pocket. Number 4. Dancing. During the long stretches of working out on the range, cowboys could go months without seeing a single woman. When they finally made it to town, they paid 25 cents for just one dance with the so-called hurdy-gurdy girls. $1 got you 4 rounds. But the real business wasn't on the dance floor. Each girl had clear instructions. As soon as the music stopped, take her partner straight to the bar. There, he'd buy a drink for her and another for himself. The saloon owner got a cut of everything, the dance and the drinks. It was a system built to empty a man's pockets without him even noticing. And it worked. Because for a man who'd spent weeks out in the middle of nowhere, those few minutes of company were worth more than any amount of money in his pocket.
Number 5. Cigar. Today, you pay between $8 and $15 for a decent cigar. In the Old West, that same pleasure cost 10 cents. With $1 in his pocket, a cowboy could walk out of the store with half a dozen of them and still have some change left. But a cigar wasn't just smoke. It was a social tool. In the saloons of Dodge City and Tombstone, offering someone a cigar carried the same weight as a firm handshake. It sealed cattle deals, ended disputes, and started conversations between strangers. Ranchers, sheriffs, and poker players shared the same smoke while deciding the fate of land and herds. After 12 hours in the saddle or plowing dry ground, lighting a cigar was the moment when the body could finally stop. It was cheap, it was simple, but for many men back then, it was the only luxury a hard life allowed. Number 6. Chewing tobacco. Before cigarettes took over America, chewing tobacco was king. And there was a practical reason for that. Cowboys on long cattle drives couldn't strike a match. One spark could set off a stampede that could kill both men and animals, so they chewed tobacco all day long. In saloons, brass spittoons were scattered across the floor. The problem was that most men missed the target on purpose, and the floor turned disgusting. Some towns started handing out fines to anyone who spit outside the spittoon. But that turned into entertainment. Bar bets would pop up to see who could hit the spittoon from 6 feet away. 10 cents bought a plug, and 10 plugs cost $1. It was cheap, it was practical, and it didn't need a match. For decades, chewing tobacco was as common as having coffee in the morning.
Number 7. Free lunch. Even before anyone came up with the word marketing, saloon owners had already mastered the art of getting money out of your pocket without you noticing. The setup was simple and worked like this. You bought a drink and got access to a loaded table of food. Sounds like a great deal, right? Wrong. There was a catch that few people noticed at the time. All that food, ham, boiled eggs, pickles, sausage, bread, was loaded with salt on purpose. The result was predictable. The more you ate, the thirstier you got. More thirst meant more mugs of beer or shots of whiskey. And every round meant more money going into the house's register. The trick worked so well that it spread across pretty much the entire American territory during the second half of the 19th century. There was nothing free about that counter. There never was. Number 8. Bath. After weeks on the trail eating dust and sleeping on the ground, the first thing a cowboy looked for when he got to a town like Dodge City wasn't whiskey or gambling. It was hot water. Bathhouses charged 25 cents for a tub, a piece of soap, and 15 timed minutes. Sounds cheap, but there was one detail the movies never tell you. The water was heated on a wood-burning stove and used for several customers in a row. The guy who paid more got in first, while the tub was still clean. The last one in line sat down in a dark soup of everyone else's dirt. Even so, there was always a line. When a herd of 2,000 cattle reached the end of the trail, hundreds of men fought for a spot in those tubs before they ever set foot in a saloon. $1 bought 4 baths, and a lot of men spent it all at once, trying to wash months on the road off their bodies. Number 9. Bed. In the Old West, sleeping somewhere under a roof was almost a luxury. For 50 cents a night, you bought a spot in a shared bunk room full of strangers. Beds lined up right next to each other, sheets nobody knew the last time they'd been washed, and a smell you can probably imagine. Cowboys, miners, card players, and men running from the law shared the same room without asking questions. Theft was so common that many men slept holding onto their boots and belongings. And here's the part that really gets you. On the busiest nights, the owner would sell the same bed to 2 complete strangers and make them share it. You paid your money and hoped the guy next to you wasn't trouble. Privacy was a concept that simply didn't exist in that world.
Number 10. The bartender. In Old West saloons, the bartender wasn't just the guy serving drinks. He was an informal banker, a confidant, and often the only sober person in the place. He knew who owed money, who was carrying a hidden gun, and who was about to start trouble. With a 25-cent tip, That guy could swap your watered-down whiskey for a better one without anyone noticing. Or simply forget that you still hadn't paid your tab from the week before. In a place where fights could turn into shootouts without warning, having the bartender on your side meant having someone watching your back while you drank with your back to the door. A lot of them kept a rifle or shotgun under the counter and decided for themselves when to use it. A well-placed dollar bought protection no amount of money could pay for once the trouble had already started.
Number 11. Lottery. 10 cents per ticket. $1 bought 10 chances. The prizes ranged from cash to horses, land, and guns. But the real business wasn't the drawing. It was the waiting time. Saloon owners set up these lotteries because they knew that while a man waited for the result, he'd order more whiskey, sit down at a poker table, and blow twice as much as he normally would. The lottery was just the bait. The profit came from the bar. And there's one detail almost nobody mentions. Most of these lotteries were completely rigged. The top prize almost always ended up in the hands of someone connected to the organizer, a relative, a partner, a hired gun. Everybody suspected it, but nobody stopped buying tickets. The hope of changing your life with 10 cents was too strong for any suspicion to hold back. Number 12. Elixirs. Before the FDA existed, any guy with a wagon and a nice-looking bottle could call himself a doctor. For $1, you could get 4 bottles of these miracle cures that promised to heal everything from back pain to a broken heart. The part nobody told you: most of them had more alcohol than the whiskey at the saloon on the corner. And the worst ones contained opium, cocaine, and even mercury, all sold legally, without a prescription, without a label explaining what was inside. Mothers gave these syrups to their small children to make them sleep without crying. Thousands of people became addicted without even knowing why. The manufacturers got rich selling addiction in a pretty bottle. This party only ended in 1906, when the federal government finally passed the Pure Food and Drug Act. Until then, $1 bought 4 doses of poison with the name of medicine. Number 13. Newspaper, 5 cents a copy. With no radio and no telegraph in most towns, the newspaper was the only way to know what was happening beyond your own street. Editors had enormous power because they decided what became news and what got buried. One article could get a politician elected or ruin a man's life overnight. And that had real consequences. It wasn't uncommon at all for an editor to get shot over something he published. Many of them carried guns just like any cowboy. The Tombstone Epitaph out in Arizona covered the gunfight at the OK Corral in October 881 with details no other record managed to capture. What's most impressive is that this newspaper never stopped running. It still exists today, more than 140 years later, still telling the stories of that region. In a time without internet or television, whoever controlled the newspaper controlled the truth. Number 14. Ammunition, 10 cents per bullet. $1 bought 10 cartridges, enough to reload a 6-shooter almost twice. It sounds cheap, but the average cowboy made about $1 a day. That means spending ammo was literally burning your wages. That's why, unlike what Hollywood shows, nobody went around shooting in every direction. Every shot had to count. In towns like Dodge City, stores sold single bullets over the counter, one by one, the same way we buy batteries today. And here's the detail not many people know. A lot of men chose to buy ammunition before they bought food. The logic was simple and brutal. Without protection, you wouldn't live long enough to need your next meal. Number 15. Used hat. A new hat cost between $2 and $5, which meant days of work for most ordinary men. That's why a very profitable side market sprang up. Stores attached to saloons sold patched-up hats for 50 cents, sometimes two for $1. When a man died, his hat was resold before he was even buried. Nobody thought that was strange. In the Arizona desert or on the open plains of Texas, going out without a hat meant a real risk of death. The western sun was relentless. Medical records from the time show that heat stroke and dehydration killed more people than gunfights. It wasn't a matter of style. It was a survival item, just as essential as the water in your canteen. That's why so many old photos show battered, misshapen hats sewn up over and over again. Every patch told a story.
Number 16. Used boots. In the Old West, a new pair of boots cost between $5 and $8. For many workers, that meant an entire week's wages. So a side market sprang up. Patched-up boots were sold for 25 cents. With $1, you could buy 4 pairs. A simple repair cost 10 cents. But here comes the part nobody liked to talk about. A lot of those boots had a previous owner, and that owner usually hadn't given them up willingly. Many came from men who died in gunfights, from illness, or in mining accidents. Gravediggers and undertakers took the boots off before burial and passed them along to merchants. Nobody asked where they came from. If the leather could handle the walk and the size fit, the deal was done. That's how the frontier economy worked.
Number 17. Knife. 15 cents each. For $1, you could take half a dozen home. Carbon steel blade, wooden handle, sold in bulk in any general store out west. But don't let the simplicity fool you. This was probably the most used tool on the American frontier. It cut rope, skinned game, prepared food, opened cans, scraped leather, and when things got rough, it became a weapon for self-defense. Cowboys bought several at a time because in the hard grind of daily work, they broke or lost their edge fast. Replacing them was cheaper than sharpening them. Local blacksmiths sometimes made tougher custom versions, but those cost a lot more. In practice, a man on the frontier without a knife on his belt was as lost as a farmer without a fence. It was the first thing you bought when you arrived in the territory and the last thing you gave up. Number 18. Lasso. 20 cents bought a lasso. $1 got you 5. It may not sound like much, but without that rope, a cowboy simply couldn't do his job. He used the lasso to control wild cattle, catch a loose horse, and tie down loads on wagons. Losing one on the trail was a serious problem because there wasn't always a place to buy another out in the middle of nowhere. That's why many of them slept with the rope wrapped over their shoulder, treating it like a survival tool. On ranches, a good roper earned the same respect as a good shooter. Skill with the rope determined who moved up and who stayed stuck doing the hardest labor. And here's a detail not many people know. A lot of ranchers deducted the cost of the lasso straight from the cowboy's pay. In other words, the cowboy had to pay in order to work. The simplest piece of equipment in the job already came with a built-in price before the first day of work. Number 19. Company. In the 1870s, towns like Dodge City and Tombstone had more saloons than churches. And in those places, female company cost between 25 cents and $1. Most of those women did not choose that life. They were widows, orphans, or immigrants who arrived in the West with no support system at all. Life expectancy was short. Untreated disease, constant violence, and alcoholism took most of them before the age of 35. But not all of them ended up that way. Some saved enough money to buy their own establishments. Mattie Silks in Denver built a small empire and ran an entire network of houses. She carried a gun, faced down rivals, and died rich. In the Old West, survival took more than courage. It took strategy, and some of those women understood that better than any gunslinger. Number 20. Perfume. 25 cents a bottle. $1 bought 4. But don't expect anything fancy. It was basically alcohol mixed with cheap floral oils. And the real reason so many people bought it had nothing to do with vanity. In the Old West, taking a bath was a rare event. A lot of people went weeks without getting anywhere near a bathtub. Cowboys out on the range, miners down in tunnels, saloon workers. Everybody smelled bad. Perfume wasn't a luxury, it was social survival. Without it, nobody could stand being around anybody else. And with that, we've reached the 20 items a single dollar could buy back then. Whiskey, ammunition, food, protection, and even perfume to cover up the smell. $1 didn't make anyone a rich man, but it kept just about anyone alive and going in the American West. Sometimes surviving was just a matter of knowing how to spend it right.